Hi everyone, welcome to another of my videos. Today I thought I'd show you how I make these mittens. They work up really fast and use very little yarn. These mittens can be made exactly the same. It doesn't matter left or right, but the way that I made it, there is a seam. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to make the right hand so that the seam is on the inside like the left is. So for this project, you're going to need a little amount of yarn. You can see that this is how much yarn I use to make one mitten. So it's you're definitely going to need a lot less than this one ball of yarn. I am using the Mandala, the Lion brand yarns, Mandala Ombre. This one is 5.3 ounces or 150 grams. It's a medium worsted weight yarn. It calls for a 5.5 millimeter hook, but I am using a 4.5. This ombre color, sorry, I should have told you that, is Mantra. It's number 551. I'm also using my handy row counter so I can keep track of how many rows I'm doing up my mitten. You'll also need a darning needle for weaving in your ends, a couple of stitch markers or bits of yarn to use as stitch markers. I like these. They're little plastic safety pins. My daughter got them for me for Christmas a couple of years ago, and I absolutely love them. And you will need a pair of scissors. Once you have all of the things that you need, go ahead and meet me back up here and we'll get started. You'll also want to grab a piece of paper and a pen because your measurements might be different than mine. So you'll want to keep track so that both of your mittens will be the same. Alright, to begin with, we are going to make a slip stitch, or slip knot rather, and chain 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is for a short cuff, so my cuff will be about that long. If you like a longer cuff, just chain more. You need to chain one more after you have the number of chains that you want, so you'll have a turning chain, and then single crochet in the second chain from the hook. So not this first one, but that one. One, 2, 3, and chain in each, or single crochet in each chain down. I will have a total of 8. 5, 6, 7, and one more. Chain 1 and turn your work. Now you're going to want to work in the back loops only to make that ribbed effect for the cuff. So this is a part of the one that's on your hook, so not this one here, but this one. We're going to go into the back loop of that one right there and into the back loop of each single crochet for a total of 8. This will work up faster than you think. Probably faster than what I'm doing on camera. 7 and 8. Chain 1 and turn. And do the same thing again in the back loops only, all the way to the end, single crochets. This entire project is done up in single crochets and chains, and it's very easy. So even someone who's probably never made anything before could pick this up and do it without too much difficulty. Of course, there are a couple of increases and decreases in the mitten part. But again, I think that even someone who is just starting out, maybe they've made a just dishcloth, will be able to work these up fairly easily. So chain 1 and turn, and continue making your single crochets in the back loops only until your cuff will fit around your wrist. So for mine, the cuff is 28 rows of back loop single crochets, and I will meet you up here at the end of those 28 rows. Remember, yours might be different than mine depending on the size of your wrist, if your wrist is bigger or smaller. So finish your rows of back loop only, and I'll meet you up here for the next part. All right, so at the end of your join of these two sections, those two rows, to make your circle, you'll chain 1, and now you're going to single crochet, 1 single crochet for every row around. At the end of this row, I will have 28. So you're just going to want to capture one side, like each row. So each bumpy part, you'll have 1 single crochet on this side of the bump and 1 single crochet on that side of the bump. So I will have 28 when I'm done, and I'm going to work over my tail here. So, and it doesn't matter if you had even rows or odd rows, as long as you have the same number of stitches around as you did rows. So I'll meet back up with you when I get to the end of my 28 single crochets. Here's where we're going to start keeping track of our rounds. That's why I have the handy stitch marker. So that was round 1, and we're going to begin round 2. So to begin round 2, I slip stitched into my first single crochet on my other glove, and since I want them to look the same, I'm going to do the same for this one. You don't have to do this. You don't have to slip stitch and chain 1. You can, let me show you. You can go straight into that first single crochet with a single crochet, and that will eliminate that seam that goes up the middle of the mitten. Because I did it with a seam for the other one, I'm going to do this one exactly the same way. So I chained 1, and I'm going to do a single crochet in this first single crochet. Now for this round, we're going to increase 4 times. We're going to increase this by 4 stitches. The best way to do this, I saw from a very, very talented young woman here on YouTube, that the best way when you have a round and you need to increase and you're not exactly sure how many spaces there's going to be, or you don't really feel like doing the math, because what you could do is take your stitch count and divide it by 4, and then you'll know how many stitches to go over before you increase. But another way to do it is to just fold your work in half, put a stitch marker on this side and a stitch marker on this side, and you'll go straight across from your join and put a stitch marker in there. So let's see how this came out. Now I am going to keep a stitch marker going at the very beginning of each of my rounds, so I always know where to go back and do my count from to make sure that I have the proper number of stitches in each round. So that was 1, and since this is an increase, I need to do a second single crochet in the same stitch, and then the next 7 should just be single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and see, I put the stitch marker in the wrong place, and then 8 would be 2 single crochets. 2 single crochets in the same single crochet, and then the next 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 2 single crochets to increase, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I guess I should have increased on the 7th one, and it doesn't really matter where your increases are as long as they're not right on top of each other. So I'm going to go ahead and do my increase here, and then continue single crocheting to the end. So for rounds 3 through 7, we're just going to continue around 32 single crochets around for each round. So we'll have rows 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 with just single crochets in every single crochet around. And you can either go directly into that first single crochet with a single crochet, or you can slip stitch, chain 1, then single crochet. And I will meet you up here when I get to the end of round 7, and that will be right here with this part of your thumb. So if you put on your mitten when you get to round 7 and it doesn't come up to here, you may need to add a row or 2 or take one out. It'll all depend on the size of your hand. So make the rows that you need to get to right there. So for round 8, I've made my chain 1, I've slip stitched chain 1 and made my first single crochet. Here you're going to want to fold your mitten in half. If you're making the left-handed mitten, your thumb hole is going to be on this side. If you're making the right-handed mitten, your thumb hole is going to be on this side. If it doesn't matter to you about the seam going up the back of your hand, then you can make both of your mittens exactly the same. So on one hand, your seam would go up the palm, and then on your right hand, the seam would go up the back of your hand if you made them exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is make them so that the seam is just going up the palm on both hands. And I've already made my left-handed mitten, so I'm going to be making the right-handed. But let me show you what to do if you're on the left-handed. So you're going to fold your mitten in half, find this stitch here, and come backwards 2. That is where your thumb will begin. If you're doing the right-handed mitten, you would do the same thing. You would find your middle and come back 2 places, and this is, well, when you come around, your thumb hole would actually be on that side to begin. So here is the middle, come back 2 places, and this is where you would put a stitch marker so you can remember where your thumb hole begins. So you're going to single crochet. I'm going to show you for the left-handed. You would single crochet over these stitches. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. After you've made the 7th one, you're going to, or whichever one where your stitch marker is, you're going to want to chain 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you have a bigger hand, you might need to put 1 or 2 more chains on there. But regardless of how many chains that you make, you're going to want to skip the next 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skipped, so you'll go into that 6th one and make a single crochet, and then finish single crocheting all the way around until you get back to the beginning, and then I'll show you what to do with the next row. Now if you're working on the right-handed mitten and your thumb hole is going to be on this side, you will single crochet all the way around. For me, this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, oops, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. And here's where I'm going to chain 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Skip the next 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and single crochet into that 6th one, and then finish off to the end of the round. So if you put this on your hand now, you can see where that seam is. In round 7, if you did an increase or a chain of 7, you'll have an increase of 2. If you had 8 chains, then you would have an increase of 3. 9 chains would be an increase of 4. So for this round, you're going to single crochet in every single crochet, including the chains, the 7 chains. So for this round, for instance, I had 32 for my last round. So I will have 34 single crochets at the end of this round. So I'm going to single crochet around until I get here, and then I'll work through the chains with you. I'm around here to the thumb hole. I wanted to show you that I left my stitch marker here at the beginning where my thumb hole was, so I'll know when I go to do the thumb not to miss that stitch or to start in the next stitch over. It'll be 14 rounds for the thumb holes, but that's not where we're at yet. Let's go back to where we are. So I wanted to show you not to forget this single crochet here right before the chains. So there's that single crochet, and then there's 7 chains. And I'm only going to work into one part of the chain so that there'll be another part down here to work over when we do the thumb. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that was 7 in the chains, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 to finish up my 34 around. Round 10. To start round 10, we need to, or I am, because of how I started this, or how I made the other mitten, I need to slip stitch into the first single crochet, chain 1, and single crochet. Now here we're going to have, on this round, 4 decreases. 4 evenly spaced decreases. So what I'm going to do is stick a stitch marker on that side, 1 across here, come back 1, and then my other one will be in the middle of my single crochets that make up the thumb. So for this round I should have 30. Whatever your count was for your last round, you should have 4 less. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to make 9 and 10 together. Now to make a decrease, it's as simple as you stick your hook in through, bring up a loop, go into the next single crochet, draw up a loop, and yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Now we're going to continue on to the next stitch marker. And I'm at the next one, so I'll pull that stitch marker out and single crochet 2 together, insert my hook, pull up a loop, insert into the next single crochet, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all 3. Now I need to single crochet until I get to the middle of the thumb. Now you could count these out and make them exactly even if you want to. I'm not going to, I'm just trying to get to the next one. So this is where I'm going to make my decrease. I pulled up 1 loop, insert into the next single crochet, bring up another loop, and pull through all 3. Now I should have done a decrease here at the beginning, and because I didn't, I'm going to do one here at the end. As long as you have 4 decreases and they're not directly on top of each other, you should be fine. Okay, and my last 2 I'm going to make together, and that should give me 30. For the next series of rounds, you're just going to single crochet 1 single crochet in every stitch around until your mitten is right about here. For me, that is 30 rounds. You might have 27, 28, you might have more rounds than that if your hand is longer. So the person I'm making this mitten for, their hand is very slightly smaller than mine, so I'm going to have 30 rounds, and that's why when I had the other mitten on, you could tell that my fingers came all the way to the top in my thumb too. So, but when they put it on, it should have just a small bit of wiggle room up there at the top. So, for rounds 11 through whatever you need to get to the tip of your fingers, the tip of your middle finger, unless of course one of your other fingers is longer. But when you get right up here, that's where you'll stop, and that's where I'll meet you back up. I've made it to the end of round 30, and for round 31, I am going to insert my hook the right way and slip stitch into my first single crochet, since that's what I've been doing throughout this project. You can see that there is a bit of a seam. If you are working in the rounds without slip stitching, then you will not have this. And for future mittens, I'm sure that I will make them without a seam as well. Now you're going to single crochet 2 together all the way around to bring this mitten together. Let me show you how it's looking on the hand. you'll want to try on your mitten at this point to make sure that it fits properly. If you can see this, my fingertips are just barely, that middle finger is just barely sticking out. And that's what you want. So I had 30 stitches in those rounds for the top of the mitten. So I should have 15 single crochets when I'm done doing 2 together. So I insert my hook, draw up a loop, insert into the next stitch, draw up a loop, pull through all 3. Do that again. 2, 3, oops, and slid back off. 3, 4, 5, 'Alright, I have my 15 and you can see that it's coming together. Now that's our only round of decreases for this. So I'm going to slip stitch back into this beginning part and fasten off. You need to make sure you leave yourself with a long enough tail because we're going to sew this top part together now. Pull this through to fasten it off. Now you want to thread up your needle. And I'm going to go in and out of these stitches all the way around. Just weave in and out of those stitches. You can start to pull on it a little bit and you'll see that it's closing up. And do a couple of more. Now I'm back to the beginning. I'm going to close that up pretty tight and then just go through some of these stitches to make sure that I close up that hole on the top. These are more for keeping out the cold than the snow. I don't know that I would recommend wearing these in the snow. They would get wet pretty fast and that would be quite uncomfortable. I mean, you can wear them outside in the snow, but I wouldn't make snowmen or have snowball fights with them. Now what I'm going to do is poke my needle down through. I'm going to start to turn it inside out so it'll be easier. And I'm going to poke my needle down through the top. If you can see this, I've closed up that hole quite nicely. Now I'm going to come under one of these strands and make a knot on the inside by bringing my needle through that loop a couple of times. Make a nice tight knot, and then weave in down through a few of these strands in one direction. Come back up through the other way. And back down through to secure that and make sure that it won't ever come out. And you can try it on again. And now we're ready to do the thumb. For the thumb, we're going to do 10 rounds of 14 single crochets. And for these, I did not slip stitch. I just did these in the round. So we're going to go into that first. Let's put our yarn on our hook. So the way that I like to do these is to not do a slip stitch on there, but if you put your yarn on your hook and then you bring up a loop, you don't have to do that slip stitch. You can go straight into making your first single crochet. So you're going to have 5 across the bottom. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you're going to have 1 up the side, and then you should have 7 across the top. That little ball just wants to roll all over the place. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 7th one is the one on the side over here. So you should have 14 in total. So I'm going to go straight in to that first one, and I'm going to use my stitch marker to keep track of my rounds better. And you're just going to go in the round 14 stitches in each round for 10 rounds, and I'll meet back up with you at the end of the 10 rounds. When you get to the last stitch in each round, instead of slip stitching and chaining 1, I'm just going to go straight into that next single crochet at the beginning. So I'm going to go in rounds like a spiral instead of joining. And I'll meet back up here with you when I get to the end of round 10. Okay, I've made it to round 10 of the thumb, and we're going to do the same thing with the thumb that we did up here. We're going to do 2 single crochets together for 7, or for however many that you had. If you had a bigger thumb hole, then you would have a bigger count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the last one. I'm going to slip stitch into that first one, fasten off. I like to fasten off with 2 chains, not just 1, because I have definitely had my work come out, and I don't know if it's because I'm not making my knot tight enough, but somehow it has worked its way out, and it's very frustrating. So I just make my knot a little bigger and a little tighter. So we're just gonna sew through like we did the top, back and forth to bring that hole closed. Doesn't take much to sew it up. And then once your hole is closed up, you just want to go across a little bit. Just back and forth a couple of times to make sure that your hole is completely closed. Don't want Jack Frost sneaking inside of there. So I'm going to do just like I did for the other side. I'm going to bring this thumb inside out and poke my needle down through the top. So my knot will be on the inside. Just going to slip up under one of these strands here. Go through that loop a couple of times, pull it to secure it, and then weave in that end down through a few of these strands and back up the other way. And that should hold it in there quite nicely. Just trim that off. So go ahead and sew in any other little strands that you might have. Little end yarns. And you can try your mitten on now, and it is complete. We have a left and a right.